Plan Commission to order of Tuesday, May 19th, 2026. Could we do, Con, could you do a roll call vote, please? A roll call, please.
Yes, Stephanie Brassington.
Here?
Luke Vessler.
Here.
Karen Pomneville.
Here.
Kyle Shelton.
Here.
Eric Johnson. Ben Tanko.
Here.
Chris Reynolds.
There.
Thank you. We do have a quorum. I just want to do a quick introduction. We have a new person here on the Plan Commission. Kyle, welcome. Thank you.
Thank you.
And Andrew, you have an introduction as well.
Yeah, we have a new staff member, an intern with us for this summer and a little bit into the fall as well. So I'll introduce Katie, and Katie will introduce herself, give her a little bit of quick background about herself, and she's going to be helping the department with a variety of projects, including our upcoming comprehensive plan update project, which I know you're all aware of and eager to get started on that. So, Katie?
Yeah, so I'm Katie. I'm currently a grad student at UW-Madison. I'm working on my master's in urban and regional planning. So like Andrew said, I'm just going to be here this summer helping out, and I'll probably be seeing you guys around a lot. So yeah, that's about it.
Awesome. Welcome. Thank you. All right, public appearances. This is an opportunity for attendees to provide public comment on matters that are not on the agenda. Attendees desiring to provide public comment on specific items on the agenda may do so at the time that agenda item is brought up. Zoom attendees wishing to speak should type their name, address, and the relevant agenda item in the Q&A feature within the online meeting platform. Zoom attendees may also register in support or opposition of an item through the Q&A feature. In-person attendees should fill out a public comment form, turn it into the meeting chairperson. When you are called upon to speak, state your name, address, and provide your public comment. Please adhere to the 3-minute limit. Written comments will not be read into the record during the meeting, but may be sent to community.development@mcfarland.wi.us to be included with the agenda materials. We do have a few people registered to speak, but we'll hold that until the public hearing. That's okay. I will make a motion to approve the minutes of April 21, 2026 Plan Commission meeting.
Second.
Any questions, comments, changes? All those in favor say aye.
Aye. Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries 6-0. All right, I will now open the public hearing on Ordinance 2026-07, an ordinance amending Article 11-11, tourist rooming houses, also known as the short-term rental ordinance of the McFarland Municipal Code. Cassandra, do you want to just give a little high-level view of this?
Yeah, so just as a brief overview, the village board referred in January the issue of reviewing the village's tourist rooming house ordinance. We also call it short-term rentals, same terminology. As background, the state of Wisconsin has what's called the right to rent law. And what the right to rent law says is municipalities can't prohibit short-term rentals, however, they do have the ability to regulate them. State law provides that municipalities, if they choose, can institute a 7-day minimum and also institute an operation limit where TRHs have to operate only 180 days out of 365 days a year. So the village did not have those provisions within its ordinance prior to this. In 2023, the village reviewed its tourist rooming house ordinance and put the 7-day, 180-day requirement in place for all non-residents. But then it carved out the ability for village residents and village businesses to do 1 to 6 day rentals and not have the 180-day stay limitation. So earlier this year, the village board asked the Public Safety Committee to re-review the ordinance and for changing to update the ordinance to require that uniformly 7 days and 180 for all permits moving forward. So the Public Safety Committee held a public hearing. They held various meetings on it. Their recommendation was not to pursue either changes, but to pursue additional enforcement of the village's ordinance. So that recommendation went to the village board, who is the ultimate decision-making body. So the decision, the village board reviewed this at the end of April, and through discussion, basically directed the Public Safety or the Plan Commission to hold a public hearing on making changes that included instituting the 7-day minimum for all permits moving forward, putting into place the 180-day operation limit, so that's within any 365-day period. They also directed that the ordinance should exempt the current permit holders from those regulations. So some people refer to that as a grandfathering clause, so that would be in place for the current permit holders. They also wanted to require quarterly reporting, confirming number of stays a year. They supported strengthening the ordinance for enforcement, and they did ask that we revisit the definition of a village business. So those changes were directed to the village attorney to draft the ordinance that's now before you. It's also of note, why would the decision-making body refer something back to a recommending body like the Plan Commission? So we are doing that out of a procedural nature to essentially recognize and satisfy the requirements of the Wisconsin statutes to the extent that the tourist rooming house ordinance and proposed changes would be considered zoning regulations. So we are going through the process to approve this as a zoning regulation, which requires a Class 2 notice and holding a public hearing, which is what we're doing tonight. So ultimately, this will go back to the village board for final approval. Any questions?
Thank you. I just want to mention a couple things to kind of enhance what she just said. I want to provide the overview and emphasize a couple of points with this public hearing tonight. This issue started as a referral from the village board, and the village board, as a decision-making body, has weighed in to provide direction on the matter. While the public is welcome to provide feedback as they like on this issue, the point the village board has indicated it is intending to move forward with the following: a 7-day minimum stay requirement, an operating limit of 180-day in any 365-day period, grandfathering all permit holders as of passage of the ordinance to be exempt from the 7-day 180 requirement, and increasing enforcement mechanisms. At this point, the purpose of the public hearing is to take comments on the ordinance as drafted, knowing those are the overarching changes the village board intends to advance. Again, just wanting to be clear about what the commission is doing tonight and the purview of its review and recommendation. Okay.
Can I ask a question? I'm still not really quite clear when you say it's procedural in nature and then it says discuss and there is an action. What consequence is the action?
It's recommending it back to the village board. So in recognizing the degree of which this would be considered a zoning regulation, we're holding the required public hearing at Plan Commission and we're referring the matter back to village board.
So the vote is procedural in that it does not really contain any content around changes, but whether just to go back to the board as is.
You can recommend changes to the ordinance, but being clear that this is coming here because it's considered a zoning regulation and it will go back to the village board for a final decision. Does that make sense?
No, sorry. I don't understand. If proposed changes were made
Sure.
and voted upon and then that was proceeded back to the board, then the board's action would be to vote on those changes as is and have to send it back, or they could at that time reject changes and then vote as it was proposed before, or in its current state. I'm sorry.
Yes, and that would be the nature of really anything a recommending body brings forward, right?
Yeah,
you review a
sure.
matter, you review a zoning ordinance and a change, you make a recommendation that can include changes, it might not include changes, and then it goes to village board, who has the ultimate authority to accept the changes, reject the changes. But it wouldn't have to come back if they reject your changes. Is that your question?
Yeah, more or less. Okay. Thank you for the clarification.
Okay, so we do have a couple people registered to speak. Kathy Carl, you want to go to the podium? You have 9 minutes. Time being donated by Gina Newell and Jen Trisna. Sorry if I pronounced that wrong. Sorry.
Yeah, I don't think I need 9 minutes. Hi, I'm Kathy Carl. I live at 6014 Lake Edge Road. I'm here in support of the proposed ordinance changes that I hope you agree are needed to protect the character and future of our village, to protect the residents that live near these short-term rentals, and that will improve the transparency and allow more accurate and efficient management of the rentals in our village. There's no doubt that commercial transient lodging operation inside our residential neighborhoods has created new and different conditions than we're used to with our ordinary residential living. Because we can't control the density or clustering, all we can do is hone in on our ordinance requirements and processes to manage and react to complaints and nuisances as they occur. Because of this, I hope you will consider additional ordinances that you will agree with and send back to the village board for approval. First, I hope we will limit the number of children. Currently, there is no limit on children under age 12, and using an occupancy cap of 8 adults and using the average children per family in Wisconsin, which is 2, that could result in 16 or more total occupants in a single 4-bedroom home. I hope you agree this is unreasonable, and a group of this size would create significant noise impacts for neighbors. So I hope you will consider putting a cap on occupants in all TRHs. Second, because noise is the most common complaint, I hope you will also consider strengthening our ordinance around this so it's less subjective. Noise from short-term rentals is very different than what we're used to. Traditionally, noise complaints in neighborhoods with permanent neighbors were limited to weekends and nighttime hours. Rarely would someone call the police during a weekday or during daytime hours. This was because neighbors have relationships with each other and they communicate. They understand the unwritten neighborhood rules and expectations. They feel accountable and usually self-correct issues over time. This doesn't apply to short-term rentals because renters are strangers to the area and to neighbors. TRH renters also don't act like permanent residents since most of them are on vacation. Noise also is common all days of the week and at all hours of the day, and the cycle of issues repeat week after week as renters turn over. Many of the short-term renters are clustered in neighborhoods where homes and outside decks are extremely close to each other, amplifying the impact of noise. I hope the village can look at the noise ordinance and eliminate areas of subjectivity if they can. A few areas, I have suggestions. Allow other means to determine if a noise complaint is reasonable or unreasonable. Currently, our ordinance requires a decibel reading, but not all noise complaints will get a decibel reading, since not all offenses will be observed by an officer, because, understandably, a noise complaint is a non-emergency call. Maybe we can put more weight on neighborhood testimony and allow supporting evidence they may have, like videos and maybe even their own decibel reader. Our noise ordinance also doesn't call out human noise under our code 2059 as one of the loud and unreasonable noises. But I can assure you, 7 drunk men partying can make more noise than you could ever imagine. I hope this can be added to eliminate future subjectivity. I hope you agree that impact to neighbors is real regardless of how it's measured, and is important and meaningful regardless of the time of day or what day it is. I hope you'll consider these updates to the section to help preserve neighbors' rights to enjoy their homes regardless of the day or time. Third, I also think we should have an additional escalation process for repeat police calls and complaints, those that don't result in a violation. This would be in addition to our current violation process. Not all complaints result in a violation. Maybe the officer isn't able to observe the incident, or maybe they don't feel the issue warrants a citation. Currently complaints are only collectively looked at during the annual permit renewal process and during the violation escalation process. I'd like to suggest a process to actively address repeat complaints and nuisances during the year. Maybe we have a predefined number of police calls within a predefined number of months. Say 4 police calls in 6 months would trigger a review that would look at the complaints, identify corrective action if needed, and could result in a suspension or revocation. I think it would also make sense that a certain number of verified complaints also become a violation in our violation process. Repeat complaints have a cumulative negative impact on neighbors and neighborhoods, and I think they should be actively addressed even when violations do not result. Residents have shared their own complaints, and I hope you all agree they have been founded by reason. No one wants to call the police to complain, and I think we can assume complaints are valid. Having this process will hold TRH owners accountable for rental conduct and provide some protection for residents who live nearby. I also want to say I support permanently revoking TRH permits where owners are found to have knowingly falsified or misrepresented information during their application process or operation. Operating a TRH is a privilege granted by the village, not a right, and the owners should be required to follow our ordinance and to provide truthful information. I hope you will agree and will update our ordinance accordingly and actively address this. Finally and lastly, I'm disappointed in the decision to grandfather existing TRHs as it locks in the impacts to many of us that these changes are trying to address. I understand why, and I hope this issue will remain an ongoing priority and you will continue to look at opportunities to phase them out. Thank you for your time and your attention. I trust you'll make the right decision for the residents, the neighborhoods, and long-term future of our community. Thank you.
Thank you. Wendy Crone?
Hello, my name is Wendy Crone. I live on Lake Edge Road. I support the ordinance as drafted and strongly urge strengthened oversight and regulation of short-term rental tourist home rooming houses to protect the long-term future of our community and our neighborhoods. In the last 20 months, there have been 10 new tourist rooming houses, and particularly alarming is that 5 of these were permitted in just the last 10 months. The high density deteriorates neighborhood communities. It damages the ability of people to engage with each other, to form relationships, and to help each other in times of need. No village resident in a residential neighborhood wants to be surrounded by visiting tourists that change every few days. It does not make for a community. These tourist rooming houses are investment properties. The owners cast them as businesses, but really they're recouping their down payment, and short-term renters are paying the property tax bill and making their mortgage payments for them. I also feel that the need to point out that extra money being spent in the community by visitors to tourist rooming houses is a false narrative being touted by the owners. A family living in that home would spend money all year round and be part of our community. For the rest of us, it's not about money. The visitors to tourist rooming houses do not volunteer at our local organizations, shovel snow for elderly neighbors, pack groceries at our food pantry, pick up trash during community service day, spend time volunteering at our schools and kids' sports teams, or help their neighbors deal with storm damage. I am concerned over the diminishing number of neighbors who are homeowners and long-term renters. Instead, there's a management company and an endless parade of short-term visitors. And what we lose with neighborhood takeover of tourist rooming houses are pieces of our community. I support increasing the regulations on tourist rooming houses. We need a better alignment with other communities in our vicinity, and this would be accomplished by passing an ordinance with a 7-day minimum requirement and a limit of 180 days of operation. Thank you.
Thank you. Don, did you wish to speak? Would you like to speak? Okay. Okay. Okay, thank you. Okay. Just close the...
Yeah, I guess maybe last call if there's anybody else online or in person that wanted to speak under the public hearing before the chair closes the public hearing. Now's the time to let us know.
I'll speak.
Okay. You can.
No, you're good.
All right, Randy, you have 6 minutes.
So,
you want to
Ra-
speak to or donate time? Okay.
Thank you. Thank you.
So 12 minutes.
Oh, I have 20 minutes now? Thank you.
Randy, you have 12 minutes.
I'm just kidding. So my name is Randy Vanderheiden. I live at 5118 Card Avenue, and I appreciate the opportunity to get up and again speak to members of the village board and the committee and the village residents. I mean, this has been a really difficult situation for everyone, and I get it. And you know, as I said at the last time, I get we're all very emotionally charged about this, right? Because we're all protecting something that we feel is important to us. And when people want to protect, they take measures to do that. And so I respect that everybody wants to protect and safeguard. As I said the last time, I think the pathway to success on this is not that, you know, hey, we won or the other group won. Really, the pathway is to work together. I mean, that's what communities do, right? It's to take an issue, it's to sit down and talk to your neighbors. And we, you know, I am one of the owners of the TRHs. I do live in the village, and actually one is right next to me. And I said this the last time, it's not one that I own, it's owned by another gentleman. And I've spent the time to get to know him. I've spent the time to sit down and talk to him. I've spent the time to say, hey, can I have your phone number and call you at 2 a.m. in the morning? That's the way that we work through this. We work together as a community. I understand that it changes the character of the neighborhoods a little bit, but to be honest with you, life continues to change. The only constant in life is change. And I think as a community, we should be supporting change to continue to make our village a place where people want to come and do business and be a part of. And if you look around Madison, it just continues to happen. And so I came here for the same reasons we all came here, right? I came here because of the tranquility, the peace, the schools. I have 2 kids. And when we got here, they were 6 and 10 or 6 and 8. I never once felt unsafe because I had those relationships with the person who owned the building next door. And so we don't have a timer up there, so I'm not sure where I'm at on time. But I think really I support the changes being made with the grandfathering, obviously, because I think it's important for the people that have taken the time to invest in the properties, right? We put not tens of thousands, but hundreds of thousands of dollars into these properties and made them look better. We've made them actually probably increase the value of your property if you're next door to them. And yes, we do need help to pay the property taxes. To be quite honest with you, the property taxes in McFarland are the same as they are in Madison. And I moved out here because they were supposed to be less. And so we do need help with people coming in. But here's what I'll tell you, right? There's really no evidence of safety issues. There's been some noise complaints, and I've worked really, really hard to address those noise complaints with my guest. And so I don't think there's a lot of evidence, and as I said the last time, we should make decisions based on evidence. And so I appreciate and support the grandfathering, and I want to work with the village and the residents to make sure that everybody's happy. I will take the call at midnight. I will take the call at 2 a.m. to come and talk to a guest. I've been a landlord for 25 years. I'm okay having those conversations. I'm not afraid of them. Our guest demographics are not disruptors. I get sometimes they bring kids. I also get that brings a level of noise. If you don't have kids, it's a level of noise you're not used to. I have kids. It's a constant buzz of noise. Our guests are, they're on vacation for 1 weekend in the year. They're individuals coming in for a funeral. They're cancer patients. I've said this the last time. They're families visiting UW graduates. And so I take accountability. We all take accountability. And I think I want to hear when there's an issue, and I want to work to help fix it. And so if you would come and rent my TRH, you would see this notice the first time it went out. First, you would see in the listing, you would see there's a noise ordinance. If you get caught, making noise after 9 o'clock or whatever it is, or making anyone uncomfortable around the neighborhood, we will ask you to leave, right, at that moment in time. The second piece is when you get your first response from me for booking the place, it will say it again. And then 3 days before that, it will say it again. Then the day you check in, it will say it again. And then when you walk in the door, it's going to be posted on the wall. And then when you walk out the back door, it's going to be posted on the window out the back door. I take this very seriously. I've been running rental businesses for 25 years, and it's hard to keep everyone happy. But I will work to do that. And so I appreciate the village moving forward with the grandfathering. I will continue to do the best job that I can do. We'll enforce the rules that we need to enforce. We proactively vet the guests. We tell them no if we don't feel they're guests that it's going to be appropriate for the neighborhood. And I guess in closing, I would just like to say again, I think the only way we solve problems in our communities is to work together. When I was a kid, we had conversations with our neighbors. And while some may not feel that I'm their neighbor because I own a TRH, I'm still your neighbor. I will help out. I will come and help you with your lawn, with your leaves, with your boat, whatever you need help with, I'll come and help. Thank you. Appreciate your time.
Thank you. Anyone else wishing to speak? Okay. I will close the public hearing on ordinance 2026-07, an ordinance amending Article 1111, tourist rooming houses, also known as the short-term rental ordinance of the McFarland Municipal Code. Okay. Moving on to our business section, discussion and action to make a recommendation to the village board regarding ordinance 2026-07, an ordinance amending Article 1111, tourist rooming houses, also known as short-term rental ordinance of the McFarland Municipal Code.
If you'd like, I can go ahead and pull the ordinance up on the screen and walk through the changes that are
Why don't you do
proposed. All right. So just going to walk through the ordinance amendment and just kind of call out what's being changed in the ordinance that corresponds to, as I said, the items that the village board requested. So we can see changes in the ordinance. We are now pulling out the provisions that allow the difference between residents and non-residents. So this just strikes the portion that talks about why we would have the distinction, so removes the preamble because now all the permits, except for those who are exempt, will be the 7-day, 180-day requirement. So that's the theme you're going to see through all of these changes of the ordinance. So that's what the first portion is.
Can you make that a little bigger?
Yeah.
Thanks.
How's that?
Even reading glasses aren't going to help with that.
I know.
Yeah. So
No,
under
that's fine.
operation of tourist rooming houses, we can see there's a revision here that calls out the provision that basically every tourist rooming house currently is required to have the owner or an agent appointed who can be present at the touring house within 45 minutes. That's always been the standard. This just makes it clear that that is a standard of operation, and it also makes clear how we're measuring that. As soon as the police department contacts the owner or the agent, they need to respond to be at the property within 45 minutes to be compliant with the ordinance. So obviously really important from our perspective, but this just makes it really clear that that is a requirement of the permit. And I'm going to go through all of these, and we can certainly hit your questions at the end if that's okay. But if anything jumps out at you, feel free to stop me. So then other provisions of the ordinance that are now in here, there's minor things like changing nights to days. That's just an attorney's preference, to be honest with you. The rest of the ordinance, when we get to the application section, something that was talked about at the Public Safety Committee and also confirmed by the board was the desire to make the tourist rooming house owners also to some degree liable for the violations that might occur at a tourist rooming house. So this section basically provides that they understand that for noise ordinances, they can also be held liable for that. Also provides a condition and requirement that they respond to the complaint within 45 minutes. Again, we're just really trying to make that clear that not only do they have to meet that provision, but the application makes you sign off that you're going to be able to, one, understand the liability of the noise ordinance, and two, be available within 45 minutes. So That's only extended to the noise ordinance. There are other provisions we'll talk about in suspension and revocation that the attorney did not really feel like could be applied to a tourist rooming house operator. For example, underage drinking. That's not a liability that we could hold against the owner as opposed to those committing the violations, if that makes sense. So further revisions we see, there's a minor revision in here that currently tourist rooming houses have to have an inspection by the building inspector and the fire inspector. We often see our permitting period runs from July 1 to June 30th. So if we do an inspection from May to June, we're not going to require the renewal to do it again. So this just provides a standard. If we've done an inspection within 60 days, we don't need to do it again. A lot of the previous provisions are being struck here. We can see that provides language for renting for 7 days or fewer or 180. That's all struck because that's not in the new ordinance for those who are not exempt from that requirement. The next section provides for those who are exempt from the requirements, they are still going to be required on their application to prove their status as a village business or a village resident. So they're all required to provide a valid ID card issued by the statutes, a residential lease if they have one, a paycheck if they have one, and a copy of their most recent tax returns. What was discussed a lot at Public Safety and Village Board was to make sure the village put in place standards to verify whether people were village residents or village businesses. The current ordinance provides that essentially with your application you would provide 2 documents that are the same for voting. So you could do a bank statement, a utility statement. There were a lot of feelings that those things may not be strong enough. With electronic billing, things of that nature, it's kind of easy to have 2 utility bills or things of that nature. So requiring the tax forms was felt to be more substantial in having people prove that they do hold this status. So that's what's outlined here. Similarly, with a village business that's claiming this exemption, they have to provide similar items, but these are more tailored to a business. So copy of their state and federal tax returns, the specifications of which are more tailored to businesses, but essentially just trying to require more substantiation to those statuses to qualify. So moving on to other provisions, there's a minor revision here. Currently, when you have a new application, we're required to notify people within 500 feet. The previous ordinance required them to prepay it. We just bill people when we issue the permit, so we've updated the ordinance to align with our practice. We don't have concerns they're not going to pay it. If they want the permit, they certainly are happy to pay the mailing fee, so that's updated in here just as an administrative provision. Further on in the ordinance, puts in, we start to talk about language, and so there was a lot of discussion on suspension and revocation of permits, and the suspension and revocation section that we'll talk about a bit later provides a standard of basically if a tourist rooming house has 2 infractions within 12 months or 3 and 5 years, they can be considered for revocation and suspension. And so I think what we're also trying to build out in this ordinance with some of these changes is recognition of that, but also recognition, those have to be substantial enough for us to revoke a permit, you know, and that's because of the right to rent law and just the judicial process in general. We wanted to make sure we were really hammering home it has to be sufficient. If we were to try to suspend or revoke a permit, we'd have to go through the citation process, the initial public safety committee, village board would weigh in. It could be appealed to a circuit court. So that's something we also wrote in here, recognizing that while the village won't shy away from protecting neighbors through that, but we do have to have substantial infractions to do that. So you'll see that theme throughout here. So we also write in language here about if the clerk reviews the permit and I determine that, for example, they don't meet the village business or they don't meet the village resident standard, we've now put a process in here for that. That isn't just my determination. It would go to the Public Safety Committee and the village board for those entities to decide whether the permit was non-renewed. So that's what's been written into this part of the ordinance. There's minor changes. There's things written in here of, they've always been required to write a nuisance response plan. We've just written in some obvious things here that you have to comply with your nuisance response plan. So kind of some staples, easy button things that the attorney felt that should be stated clearly. Moving to enforcements and penalties. So another item that was talked about was just making sure the village is enforcing the tourist rooming house ordinance to the fullest extent we can. So holding owners liable for violations, personally liable for violations, so that's written into the enforcement and penalties section. We saw it above. It's carried through in a couple places. Suspension, revocation, and non-renewal. So this is a section, as I said, that was talked about a lot. This section is now what we can use for suspension, revocation, and if we choose to not review or not renew a permit. So most of this stayed the same from what I would call the skeleton of it. One thing we made clear in here that has always been the case is a court conviction is not required for an incident to be considered a violation under this section. So the reason that's the case is what we see is when, and Chief Redmond is on here, so if he wants to chime in, he can, but oftentimes the police department handles noise complaints in the same way uniformly. And what we often see is the police department will show up, and oftentimes the first recourse is to tell people to turn it down. And as long as people are compliant with that, a citation isn't issued. But that incident can still be considered under this section as being a violation. So that's what this is just trying to recognize and make clear, is we don't have to issue a ticket to consider it an infraction for this section. So what's also nice is this has now been rewritten to tell you what the various standards are of habitual violations. So you can see 11359 is now called nuisance response plan. So it's easier to read and it's easier for someone to see what are the infractions that we would consider violations. So pretty straightforward in that section. It's carried through various places. A last provision that was inserted into the ordinance, and we see this in other places of the code and nuisances, but we also wanted to be able to not only consider these infractions by the police department, but in this section we also wanted to be able to consider the totality of the number of complaints that are made, the number of times the police department needs to show up at properties. So we also can take into account if the police department is showing up for several noise complaints on a regular basis and say only 2 times they tell them to turn it down, but we're still seeing these multiple calls for service, the police department can consider that as part of their case to move forward with the suspension and revocation. And I want to make clear that's still a high standard and a high bar that the police department and prosecutor have to overcome to do this, but also just taking into account the totality of strain of services that a tourist rooming house might cause for the village. So the last section provides just the clear restrictions that we don't allow rentals for less than 7 days, except for those who are current permit holders. So there's language in here that basically those who held a permit, and this is drafted based on the village board potentially approving it at their next meeting. So as of that date, anybody who holds a permit would be exempt from this requirement. They're required to maintain that status. It can't be revoked or suspended. Annually, they have to provide documentation that they still qualify for it. Only the property or only the village resident or village business who holds the permit now gets this status. If they sell the property or anything, the exemption doesn't come with it. They're required to abide by all the reporting requirements, and they can't let the dwelling lapse as a TRH for more than 1 year at a time. So those same sort of provisions exist for the limitation to 180 days. So those are similar. I don't need to go through that again. One of the final section talks about reporting requirements. This was another request of the Public Safety Committee and the Village Board, requiring that on a quarterly basis, TRHs provide the rental history, showing number of days of stays, the amount charged for each rental, room tax paid. That to some degree is already being required through the room tax process. And also requiring the record of each rental transaction from the third-party platform. So pretty straightforward. That's all the changes in the ordinance. So are there questions, comment, concerns on that?
Is there a legal justification for the so-called grandfathering or exemption that
Yes.
we're discussing here tonight?
Yep, there is. There is a court case currently out there between Wildwood Estates and Village of Summit that has set the stage for these requirements needing to be seen in the same light as the zoning regulation is what we're doing, and it brings into account the issue of a non-conforming use. So that's the legal basis for which they are. Our attorney has recommended that they be grandfathered until such time as that court case would be. If the Wisconsin Supreme Court takes it up, and then if they were to change the ruling, that could be revisited. But until something happens, that's the recommendation.
So if depending on how that case ends up, where it ends up, we could reverse that grandfathering exemption clause?
Yes.
The village
if
board could?
The village,
obviously.
if the current ruling that is at the Court of Appeals were to be overturned, the village board can revisit that.
Okay.
Any other questions?
Thank you. Anybody have any comments or questions?
Yeah, sorry, is it time for comments?
Yes, yes it is.
Yeah, I guess I'll just have a few comments, and I don't really know of what worth it'll be, but nonetheless, get on the record. And I wasn't able to attend the two meetings live, just was able to review the minutes and the packets for those meetings. But, I mean, I'm of the opinion that, I agree with largely what the Public Safety Committee came up with. I believe there is a problem, and there's certainly great room for improvement. I just think that's largely done through strengthening of the ordinance, certainly improving upon enforcement, and maybe even increasing some penalties. But I just feel like the revision of the ordinance to extend the minimum stay to the possible extent of that state statute allows is a bridge too far. And I'm not in support of that, but recognize the procedural nature here in the process.
Anyone else? Nothing? I will make a motion to recommend to the village board approval of ordinance 2026-07, an ordinance amending Article 1111, tourist rooming houses, also known as the short-term rental ordinance of the McFarland Municipal Code.
I'll second.
First from me and a second from Chris. Any additional comments, questions? All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries 6-0. All right, thank you. All right, discussion and action to make a recommendation to the village board regarding resolution 2026-09, a resolution approving the grant of a utility easement within Outlot 2 Sperle Corners Subdivision. Are you taking it, Con?
Yes.
Okay.
Hopefully this one should be short too. So Lakestone Properties is requesting a public utility easement on Outlot 2. They own lots 1 through 18, of Sperle Corners. But Outlot 2 is the land that was dedicated as the parkland. And this would include the westerly front along Devil's Lake Way. And then, let me pull up the photo, sorry. Okay, thanks. Andrew will pull up the easement. There it goes. And then it would include the little hash area on the left side there. And that would be the location where the additional utility service space is needed. And as again, the lot 1 through 18 are owned by Lakestone Properties, they will have that right to allow and make those changes. This is, again, village property, so it will go to the village board for approval.
So essentially, Lakestone's been working with utility providers, gas, electric, fiber, so forth. Some of those utility providers found that working within the right-of-way and some of the other improvements that would be in the right-of-way, like village sewer, water, utility, such like that, the spacing was a little tight, and so Lakestone has proposed a public utility on private property for the lots in the subdivision. And as Kong mentioned, since they are the owners of all of the other lots, they can just simply record an easement on their lots with the Register of Deeds because they own them. They can't do that without the village board's approval for Outlot 2. Hence bringing it to the Planning Commission for a recommendation to the board. Staff recommends approval.
Any questions?
My only question is, Outlot 2 is dedicated for potential future parkland that could look like a lot of things. It could just be grass, but would that easement have any potential to get in the way of anything we might do later? Even ramp off the street, for ADA accessibility, anything like that?
No, I wouldn't assume so because those are underground utilities through that area, so they should be buried sufficiently under, if we put a ramp, or wouldn't really be a ramp because the sidewalk would be on the left side of that 10-foot. So
presumably you'd come up off the street somewhere else.
Yeah, so essentially this line, think of that as almost the back of the sidewalk. So then there's sidewalk here, terrace, and then the curb, right? So if there was a ramp, it would be, somewhere in this area. You have the sidewalk, and then this would likely just be grass on the inside of that. Underground utilities through there. I wouldn't think it would impact where we would put a future playground or some equipment of some sort.
I mean, to that point, if the utilities were in the right of way and we wanted to do something, it would be on their dime to relocate or accommodate. But on a private easement, that wouldn't necessarily be the case. Correct? I mean, so just to add that protection, is there a way you could put that? Well, I guess one, are you understanding that the same way? And then two, could we kind of add that sort of cost protection?
So I think it would be more applicable to the other private lots. So for example, take any of the other lots. If Lakestone or a future owner of that lot wanted to place something in that 10-foot area, the easement might be prohibitive in doing that. Of course, if you're going to own that lot, that's going to be disclosed to you when you go through the purchase and the title search of that. So you would know before you purchase that property, oh, there's a utility easement here. Maybe that impacts what you want to do or don't want to do. The village, because this is a public utility, has the right to use that same 10 feet, just like the utility companies as well, because it is written as a public utility, so it's not specific to any one utility company or organization.
Okay. Yeah, and I'm not so worried about the private lots. That's their cost and risk to bear that they're agreeing to, just in the context of this one.
Yeah, I mean,
Okay.
typically how it works, within village right-of-way, if there's a utility that is in the way, it is essentially, unless there's an existing easement, you can require that utility to move whatever they need to move on their dime, which is, I think, the point you're
Yeah.
making, right?
Yep.
If we think about the long-term use of this property, like as I mentioned, the sidewalk is on the other side of the easement. I think there would be very little in terms of improvements that we would want to, above ground improvements that we would want to place in that first 10 feet. that
Not
would
gonna
be
put-
of significance, importance to us. You know, I'm not immediately thinking of anything that came to mind, and as it was shared with Public Works Department leading up to tonight, they didn't have any concern either.
Yeah, and I guess my head was going to like underground interferences with, and I don't know exactly the restrictions around the outlot, but like if you were running like water or anything like that,
Like what
I
if,
don't know, you build a
what,
splash pad and you're, running water and.
Yeah, we're not gonna be big enough on this one for that, but
Even just a water fountain and a,
Right.
electricity for a pavilion or something, right?
yeah, usually I would think in most cases, the depth of the water is lower than the depth of cable fiber coming through there. But yes, we would potentially need to plan around any existing utilities that are in that 10 feet if we're also extending something across them.
Yeah, no, I just figured I'd raise it. I mean, I defer to you if you think there's just no risk there or needed protection in the future.
I don't have a concern.
Okay.
If it helps ease you at all in any way too, I would just share that not only was this shared with the Public Works Department in their review, beyond the exhibit, the rest of the easement here was prepared by the village attorney and for the board's approval. And he did not raise that concern as well.
Did he raise any concern?
Nope, none that I recall.
I'll move to recommend to the village board approval of resolution 2026-09, resolution approving utility easement within Outlot 2, Sperle Corners Subdivision.
I'll second. First from Luke and a second from me. Any additional questions or comments? All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries 6-0. Okay, we'll move on to discussion regarding the village's 2026 Park Impact Fee Study. Andrew
Okay.
Crone? Okay.
Give me a second here. So the Planning Commission discussed this at your February meeting. I provided a presentation that evening. The full presentation's in tonight's packet. I was not planning to go through all of the presentation slides again, unless there's something that you would like me to revisit. Certainly, Kyle, Ben, I know you're coming into this sort of at a midpoint, so feel free to ask any questions that you have on that material. But essentially what the village is looking to do with this project is update our park impact fee study. The park impact fee study, or needs assessment as it's also sometimes called, is required under state statutes if you're going to charge an impact fee. So that your impact fee meets state statute, has a rational basis for how you determined your impact fee. And in this case, we have two park impact fees. We have a park improvement impact fee. So think of that as above ground improvements generally that you would put on park land. You might spend park improvement dollars to build a shelter or playground equipment or a new recreational trail, those types of improvements. We also have a fee in lieu of land dedication, also called the parkland impact fee. So the village subdivision ordinance requires a certain amount of parkland to be dedicated with each new dwelling unit that a developer might construct. And the village has the discretion to decide whether or not to accept whatever parkland a developer is proposing, or to propose as an alternative collecting fees in lieu of the parkland dedication, or a combination of both. And we often see a combination of both in what I would call new subdivisions. The one that we just looked at, Sperle Corners Outlot 2, was a partial dedication, and then there's a fee in lieu for the remaining amount. So the last time the village updated its park impact fee study was in 2020, after we adopted the 2019 Comprehensive Outdoor Recreation Plan, which guides our long-term improvements for our parks. That plan is updated every 5 years, and in 2025, we adopted the new Comprehensive Outdoor Rec Plan. And one of the recommendations of that plan was to revisit and update our 2020 Park Impact Fee Study. So last fall, the board approved a contract with Baker Tilly, our consultant that worked on our 2020 Impact Fee Study, and is working on this study along with staff. And so now we're going through the process of determining what those proposed impact fees might look like. And as I mentioned in February, this is a study to determine what the park impact fees might be. At the end of that study, we'll hold a public hearing. We'll talk about that later, about when we might be holding that. And then the village board essentially votes to accept the study. By separate action, the village board will have to determine whether and how to change any of those two impact fees. So that would be a separate action that would follow up. So one is to accept the study that says, well, this is what the recommended fee is. What the board, and ultimately what the Planning Commission recommends to the board, could be what's in the study. It could be less than what's in the study, but it can't be more. You can't charge more than what your study says you could charge. But from a policy perspective, you could always charge less. Or to look at that in a different manner, when the village adopted the 2020 impact fee study, we found that there was going to be a large substantial change to the park improvement impact fee, because the last time the village had done a study was in 2004. So we had gone quite a long time without an updated study, and so the impact fees didn't change much over that course of the time. So naturally, if you take that big of a gap, you might find, oh boy, it's a big step. So at that time, the total amount that the impact fee was going to go up, the village board opted to increase the impact fee by 20% per year for 5 years to get to that recommended total. Plus, we've always had in our ordinance, the board has the ability each year to adjust for inflation every year, which we've been doing since 2020, except for this year. We did not do an inflation adjustment for 2026 because the board determined that since we were going to do this study, we would let the study work happen and see what the results come back, and then revisit what the adjustment should look like. So that's a little bit of background at a high level of kind of where we were, where we've been, where we're headed a little bit. So when we met in February, there was, I would say, general consensus amongst the Planning Commission that the methodology and the proposed impact fee as it relates to the park improvements was acceptable. So I'm going to skip ahead a little bit to where we get to that section. There's a lot of good background information here. This was the preliminary park improvement impact fee. And it's different based on whether it's a single-family dwelling, multifamily dwelling, or group quarters. And basically, if you recall, this methodology is based on what is the value of all the improvements in our parks, what is our current population, what is then the value per person for all of the improvements that we have in our village parks. That sets our level of service. We look at what is the average number of people per household, and we apply that to the cost per person, and we arrive at what the impact fee would be for park improvements. And then likewise, there was a table that showed back from the 2004 study, changes, how it has changed up until the 2020, how it was phased up through 2025, our current rates. This first column was what it would have been had we made the inflation adjustment for 2026, but we did not, here in this salmon color. And then this green is what's proposed, the preliminary proposal, based on all of those updated data points. Then for the parkland impact fee, this methodology, again, there's a number of inputs, and it starts with what our level of service goal is, which is 18.5 acres of parkland per 1,000 residents. So that's passively accessible. So what that means is it's active space. It could be some conservancy areas, but it excludes areas in parks that are wetlands or floodplain areas. So
Where did that come from, that particular
18.5.
formula or whatever, the 18 per 1,000 residents, is that what it is?
correct.
Yeah. What's the origins of that?
That is within our 2025 comprehensive outdoor recreation plan. So as we
Okay.
went through adoption of that plan, we talked about what is our existing level of service right now? It's actually 18.5. And we said we want to keep it at that, is
Okay.
essentially where that comes from.
Is that comparable to other surrounding communities? Do they use that formula?
Different communities are gonna use different formulas. Some may not even, truthfully, may not even set a standard, and you can debate whether that's good practice or not.
Yeah.
But generally, the National Park and Recreation Association long ago put out guidelines for acres of parkland. Those have been sometimes modified over the years. That has generally ranged anywhere from like 10.5 to 15 acres. You generally see communities, just from my perspective, somewhere in the range of around 15 acres per 1,000.
So this does
Some might be a little
this-
bit lower,
this
some might be a
seems
little
higher
higher.
than maybe what's being recommended by national associations and maybe
I would
even
say
the
it's
communities.
not necessarily an acceptable national standard anymore from the standpoint of what organizations like the National Recreation Association have said is there's a lot of ways in which to measure the quality of your parks, right? So you could have a lot of parks. You could have 25 acres per 1,000. What if there's nothing in those parks?
Yeah.
Well, what value are they offering the community? In other cases, you might have a smaller park, but there's a lot of things in it for your residents, right? And so when we went through the comprehensive outdoor rec plan, we talked about there's a lot of different ways in which we can look at our park system and say, is it meeting the needs of our community? One of them is level of service of just how much land. We want to make sure that as the population continues to grow and as we have new areas that we develop, we create new parklands to support that future growth. And that's why we have things like impact fees, right, and parkland dedication. But that wouldn't necessarily be the only way in which we might look at the quality of our park system. And then I would also certainly say different communities have different values, right? Some communities might value park and recreation more than others, and they might see it as a benefit that they want to provide their community. They might see it as a way of attracting residents to their community because they have a nice, robust park system,
Sure.
right? So I always get a bit nervous on comparisons to other communities because it's about what McFarland wants for itself, right?
Well, I'm just wondering, what's the impact? I mean, there's a fairly complicated set of formulas that set these fees. What is the impact of that on the amount of fees that are charged? Is it a significant impact on those fees?
It's certainly a part of the data points that ultimately gets to what the cost is per dwelling unit. So whether that moves up or down, it can have an impact. I think what we talked about last month is the one that's probably most impactful, which we'll get to shortly, is the price per acre of land. Which is, so we have this level of service, and there was, at the February meeting, there was general consensus. Yes, we just went through this process in the comprehensive outdoor rec plan to say it's 18.5 acres per thousand. We weren't really going to go back and revisit that. The next would be the land dedication requirement.
So the new study won't go back and take a look at that?
Correct.
That formula?
It will not, we are not
That's a
looking to go
given
back. It's a
as far as they're
given.
concerned.
It's a given as far as the village is concerned.
The study is using the inputs that they were given, and one of those was the 18.5 acres.
Okay.
Right.
Okay.
Correct. Yep. Then the next is land dedication requirement, which is, how many square feet per single-family dwelling unit or multifamily or group quarters would we need? And this is the current rate. So a single family has to dedicate 2,106 square feet. And that's based on looking at census data for the amount of people per household. We talked about this last month. That has continually declined, decade over decade over decade. The most recent data that we have is 2.36 for all types of households in the village. And so that's continued to decline. But when we look at it for owner-occupied units and renter-occupied units, we see a small, I don't know if you'd consider it small, but about a tenth or 7/100ths decrease in owner-occupied, which is what we use to set the single family. And then just a slight tick up for renter-occupied, which is what we use for the multifamily group quarters. As things progress and we get to the end of this study and we would look at an ordinance to revise our land dedication requirement, so there would be a slight decrease for single family, a slight increase for multifamily, slight increase for group quarters, not particularly significant in the amounts. But we would make that adjustment based on the best data we have at this time in terms of people per household. And then we got to the cost per acre of land. And again, as a recap, in 2006, the village looked at comparable land sales in the area, and they set the standard at $60,000 an acre. And that's essentially, in 2020, that was adjusted for consumer price inflation up to $81,000 per acre. And if you were to continue to adjust that through December of 2025, it would be up to $98,000 per acre. If you adjusted it through April of this year, it's slightly over $100,000 an acre now. If you think about inflation in the last couple of months, we've seen an uptick in inflation, and so that certainly would be higher if you took that data point today. Again, what I heard, I think what staff heard from the February meeting is consensus around not using the 2006 value adjusted for inflation, looking at more recent land sale comps, comparables, and determining based on that data what that cost per acre might look like. And that's kind of where we ended the discussion in February. The direction was staff go back, do some of that, work with a consultant, bring us some of that information, and we'll discuss it. So that's where we're at tonight.
So that cost per acre is probably the most significant determinant of the size of the fees?
Yes, I would say so.
Okay. And the way we've been using the CPI is annual CPI applied to that every year? Because we've had, over the last 5 or 6, 7 years, we've had tremendous fluctuation in the CPI.
Yep.
Is there any way we can, would they recommend an average over a moving average or something like that? To kind of keep that CPI figure down?
That's certainly something I could ask of the consultant. I think that would be at the village discretion instead of using 1 year data point to say take an average of the last 3 or 5 to maybe normalize out unforeseen things in the marketplace, I'll call it.
Because we've gone from 9% to 2% to 3% over the last,
Yeah.
because of the COVID thing. And
Yeah, that's certainly something we
we
could take a look
certainly
at.
were dealing with some very high inflation rates in our future, I think, because of the policies that are going on nationally.
Certainly could be. Yes, I would agree with you on that. So I'll bring that back to him. That's a good suggestion, Chris. And I think what we would have to balance, if that was something the Planning Commission wanted to do and the board wanted to do, is how many years do you go back? Because at the end of the day, how the village is using these funds is it's being applied at current market rates for whatever you're buying for land or park equipment, right? So you do want your fee, though, to reflect what your costs are going to be as well, right?
Of course, real estate and land inflation is far different from consumer price index.
Agreed.
Yep.
So which figures are we using? We're using consumer price index?
Correct. We are using consumer price, particularly the Midwest Consumer Price Index.
Okay.
And yes, that is, I think, almost a given that that level of inflation will always lag lower than real estate
Should,
inflation,
yeah.
which is another way in which, if you want to think about it this way, that the fee is more moderately going up because real estate inflation is much higher than consumer price. I totally agree with that.
true.
Yeah.
Can you clarify? I thought you said that we were getting off a reference to the 2006 value entirely, and you were just going to pull new comps through a
Correct.
consultant.
I'm getting to
Okay.
that, to those
Oh.
numbers.
Yeah, there's a chart that compares both of those things.
Oh, okay. Yeah, I mean, the whole thing would be based on the assumption that the 2006 valuation was a good data point to start with.
Yep. So value of an acre of land. What we talked about previously is there's a lot of things that can drive that. Certainly, the biggest one is location, location, location. Number one thing in real estate, right? So proximity to urban services, public water and sewer, improved roads, recreational trails, major roads, proximity to waterfront, right? Things on a river or a lake have a higher cost than elsewhere. Maybe the amount of, does it have pre-existing buildings or improvements on that property? Are there environmental constraints, wetlands or floodplains? Generally going to bring the valuation of a property down, right? So we did some research on some comparables, and we grouped them into 3 categories. One we called suburban property. So I would say this is property already within the village. Generally, it's a vacant buildable lot. It has access to urban services, meaning there's a public water main and sewer main out in front of this property. Generally, there's probably an improved street with curb and gutter and sidewalk, things of that nature. Near suburban, which is property that is adjacent to urban services or in close proximity. It may or may not be within the village or its urban service area at the time of purchase, but due to proximity, incorporation into both is probably going to happen in the near term. This might be a property that is in the village, but it's undeveloped yet, but it's adjacent to urban services, or it's right adjacent to the village, and the intent of the buyer because of that proximity, is to get it annexed and added to the urban service area. Then there's ones that I'm going to call ex-urban. They're a little bit further away from the village current urban service area. And so probably in the next 5 years, it's unlikely that you would see public sewer and water extended to that property, right? So, so then what we did is we looked at land sales since 2000 through basically mid-May.
Could you blow that up a little bit?
Yes, yeah, no problem. Very small.
Thank you.
That probably went a little too far there. Okay. So we looked at some vacant lots that have sold in the village. Some of them may have had some improvements on them as well. And in some cases, those might be older improvements, and so those are raised, and sort of there's something new built on that lot. And looked at the sale date, acres, price, calculate the price per acre, did an adjustment based on consumer price index, just to, some of them are 3 years old now. And what we found was, the median of that was about 450. In this case, it makes sense to report the median because there's some in here that, because the lots are so small and they had improvements on them, it's not quite the equivalent of looking at a vacant lot. And so the price per acre is going to go up because you have to account for the value of those improvements.
Wasn't the one that you listed on May 12th, I mean, since that's such a unique situation, isn't that skewing your numbers slightly?
For that, I looked at the value of the land, assessed value of the property, and the amount of square footage the village, this is a village purchase, is purchasing, and then applied that to the price per acre. So it is a bit lower on the low side. That's why I would say it kind of balances like the one above it, though, which is much higher. $4.5 million per acre. I mean, the village didn't pay $4.5 million for the property, right? But it's so small and it had improvements on it that, well, that's the way it calculates. So the median would take those highs and lows and get rid of them.
Yeah, but they also provide a very wide range to run a median on.
Sure.
And this town has a wide range of prices on property and houses and that kind of thing. So
yeah. So you end up when you take this last one, which is the average for those that were unimproved. There was no existing structure on them. That would run like $366,000. Then the near suburban category. Again, these could be already within the village, or at least adjacent. That could be in the urban service area or are adjacent, but urban services aren't on the property yet. And so basically I categorized those as, there was 3 of them. That average was a little over 80,000 average per acre. And then the ex-urban, again, you're going to get further away from the village here. And then what some of those, so again, extension of urban services to sort of support development on those properties, which is why you'd be collecting a fee to begin with in the first place, is because there's some development happening. The average then is about 81,000 an acre, based on some recent comps. So these are those all together, what they look like. Adjusted for inflation, I threw on there again that 2006, this is adjusted all the way through end of April for inflation.
Just to go back, what was the average for the suburban compared to the median? And maybe a couple charts back, I think.
Yep, let me bring us back there. Average 837, median 449. And then this is the unimproved.
Oh, okay.
Again, just trying to take some of those that have improvements into a different light. Okay,
Did you
so
set a distance? I'm sorry, from the definition of the ex-urban area, like miles from the village limit?
all of those that were mentioned would be within a half mile. Let me just look at that list.
I guess there'd probably be a range for the near suburban.
Yeah, all I can fairly safely say all of these within a half mile of the current, and some of these are in the village, mind you. At the time of acquisition, they may not have been. They are now. So, this top one, Community Park, was not in the village at the time of purchase, but then was since annexed afterwards. The second one, the village owns, that was already in the village at the time of purchase. And then a couple of these are just, the next two are outside of the village, but within a half mile of the village boundary, current village boundary. Okay. So then, as I discussed in the staff report, I think that the best approach is looking at, of those comparables, those that are the most recent, so 2025, 2026, and then likely looking at those that are in the near urban and ex-urban. And the rationale provided for that is when you think about when you would be collecting the fee in lieu, most of the time that is going to be, a developer's constructing something, and a lot of times that might be a new subdivision, right? Like a Sperle Corners or Rosewood Fields or something like that. And so that's likely, areas that are in the near urban category, I think most influenced by near urban. And then likely, also likewise, how the village might acquire property probably tilts a little bit more towards areas at the edge of the community, like when we purchased Community Park, things of that nature. That's not to say that there wouldn't be areas within the existing village boundary where the village might decide it would want to pursue a purchase. There are parcels identified in the comprehensive outdoor recreation plan that, for example, they might be adjacent to an existing park, right? And through that planning process, we've identified as, hey, someday, if that property becomes available for sale, the village might be interested in purchasing it because it's adjacent to a park and that would allow us to expand our park, right? And in particular, if those lots have improvements on them, right, the price per acre is going to be on the higher side. But when we think about what might be more common, it's those instances like a new subdivision where we're looking at either full fee in lieu or a partial. I mean, we do collect fee in lieu for infill development if there's an area within the village that it's increasing its number of dwelling units, then they have to pay the fee in lieu on those as well. So when you look at kind of narrowing down a little bit about maybe what might be most relevant, you get to an average of about $88,000 per acre. And then There's 4 of them there. For simplicity's sake, I rounded that to 90,000 per acre. And so this would be what the fee in lieu would be. And then I'll blow this up. So in this particular case, that modification would result in a decrease from the current rates, which is reflected in this first column here. The change from current rate, 2025 rate, to preliminary 2026, and how that would decrease. The first line item here would be a single family. The next one would be duplex multifamily. The last one is, group quarters.
If a developer wanted to minimize these fees, and I noticed that you can waive some of these fees for affordable housing. If they say they're going to provide a park as part of their development, I think you mentioned this earlier, they could decrease the amount of these fees that they would have to pay on a development if they provided the park and then, equip the park and all of that.
Yeah, good question, Chris. So usually the default is to provide the parkland. Then it's up to the village's discretion whether or not it would accept less than the total amount of parkland required based on how many dwelling units they're building, or a combination of fee and lieu. So it's always a village decision, but yes, the developer has the option to say, well, this is what we'd like to do, and they present it, right? And from the village's perspective, sometimes it makes more sense to either accept no parkland or accept a reduced amount. The most recent example was Sperle Corners. We had that discussion. It was like, well, we've got the Rosewood Fields larger neighborhood park just to the north that's connected by a trail. To the south, we've got the dog park and the Frisbee golf. So we're like, well, there's some amenities nearby. Maybe a smaller mini park would be fine here. And that was a decision that was up to the planning commission and the board, right?
Okay.
Yeah.
So it's at the village's discretion as to whether they would accept a developer who just say, well, we'll build the park in our development, or include it as part of the.
Yeah. And so the other part of your question is, sometimes the developer will want to put the improvements in themselves.
Yeah.
Viridian wanted to do that with Rosewood Fields. So what they ended up having to do was then go work with our Park and Rec committee.
Mm-hmm.
They developed a plan for the improvements that were going to be in the park. A cost estimate for those improvements. The village then accepted that through our development agreement and then credited Viridian for the park improvement fee because they were going to foot the bill initially. And the reason why they wanted to do that is they wanted that park finished on day one to help sell the rest of the lots.
Okay.
Other developers, maybe they're not as interested in that, and they'll defer to the village to do the improvements.
Mm-hmm.
That's the case with Lakestone. They aren't going to put the improvements in, so the village will put them in at our discretion when we want to move forward with that. But it's always, in either of those, it's a developer might have a preference, but then ultimately it's the village's discretion on how to approach it.
What about the waiver for affordable housing? How does that work?
So a developer could request to waive the impact fee or a partial waiver. Again, that's at the discretion of the village board. We've done that once in the past for an affordable housing project. So
it has to be a project, part of your development. If it has affordable housing in it, you can't somehow finagle that into a waiver or a discount on some of these fees?
So, yeah, it has to be, I think, more than just a developer saying, well, in my opinion, these are affordable rates, so I'd like the waiver. or a partial waiver.
Well, I mean, that
Right.
can be
Subjective,
We
right?
did that with,
obviously.
yeah, we did that with the apartments across from the Public Safety Center. And that was I'm trying to remember, it was a while ago, so I'm just trying to
Yeah.
remember.
What
What
we-
did we do?
So any unit that was below 80% county median income
Mhm.
got the waiver. If any unit was at 80% county median income or market rate or higher, and that building has a mix of those, we didn't waive it. So we considered units that are priced at 80% of the county median income to be market rate, which is pretty much standard in the industry. And so those that were below that, the board approved the waiver.
But there was also some park that was created that the developer built as part of that as well. There was some park and there was a question whether or not the park was for open park space or for their residents only. And that became part of an issue as well, because they said, we're building a park. And then the question was, is it really a park for everyone, or is it a park just for the residents? And that kind of altered that. Should we then do this if that's really, they wanted to waive some of those park impact fees?
I don't know how you could restrict
It
a
was,
park
it
like
was,
that.
well,
Yeah.
I think there's a fence around it, so I think that'll do it.
How high was the fence?
Yeah, you're right. I forget the exacts of
I
that.
don't remember
but
exactly,
They were
but it was-
proposing a playground, and then were maybe, private for
Yeah.
the residents that were
Right.
there, but then seeking a potential credit for that. And I think the direction at the end was, no, we weren't going to accept that because it wasn't really a public
Public
amenity,
park, right.
right? But there
So
was.
it kind of fell between two ideas of waiving it and charging it. And I just remember it went on for a little while
Yeah.
before we actually got to the bottom line.
Yeah, but Chris, to your question, I think is it has to be something that we know is sort of meets some type of recognized threshold as to why that's considered affordable housing,
Right.
that we would then consider the waiver.
In terms of both housing that you would sell and rent that you would charge on a multifamily?
Correct. The waiver could be for rental or owner occupied dwelling units.
Okay.
Correct. Yep. So sort of where we're at with you folks tonight is trying to get your feedback on, acceptability. You're not voting on this tonight, but just general consensus on approach and methodology here in terms of the cost per acre. Now that you've gotten a little bit more data on recent land sales, kind of where those are in the community, what makes each one maybe a little bit unique, and then how you might want to bring that forward. The next step would be to finalize the study, and then we would be ready for a public hearing, presumably as early as next June, or next June, next month.
This coming June.
This coming June, thank you. Stumbling on that for a bit. We also talked about updating the Park and Rec Committee at the June meeting as well on the status of this project and their feedback as well. So that's kind of where we sit at the moment.
I do have a couple of questions for you.
Yeah.
So there's the impact fee, and then there's the park improvement fee, right? The impact fee is purchasing the land, correct? And the improvement fee is the improvements to that land. Am I understanding that?
Both of them are park impact fees.
Uh-huh,
So park impact fees,
uh-huh,
one of them is park improvement, the other one is park land.
park land.
Yeah.
How does the total spend between those two compare? If you look back 5 or 10 years, how does purchasing land weigh against the improvements to the land? Is it even? Is it 80-20? Just for my own, I'm just
In
curious.
terms of village investments
Yeah,
of those, I could not,
Off the cuff. is
I
okay,
couldn't
too.
probably off the cuff
Yeah,
give
that'd
you
be really difficult. So I'm on
Yeah.
the Parks and Rec Committee,
Okay.
so we see a lot of this, but, you know, we have big projects like the soccer park where, you know, it's on there that was purchased for $875,000, but then we decided to do, you know, big things like the soccer fields, and, you know,
Mhm.
we've put a few $1 million into it in improvements since then.
Sure.
That's kind of a once every 10, 20, you know, year kind of thing. Typically, we're talking
Yeah.
about playgrounds for $80,000 on top of the land that was purchased, that kind of thing.
Got it. Okay. Okay, understood.
Yeah.
And then the second question that I have is, how does the cost per acre under the methodology the refreshed methodology that you guys are bringing forward today, how does that compare to local, or to nearby communities?
Yeah. Give me a second and I can provide that. I'm going to give a somewhat standard caveat when we look at this data, though, which is the price of an acre in Sun Prairie, Middleton, Verona, Wanakee, different than McFarland. How they value their parks might be different, right? Whether they want more parkland or less parkland, right? So keep that in mind. Also, communities don't always stay on top of adjustments. Maybe they don't do an annual inflation adjustment. Maybe they haven't revisited their impact fee study in 10, 15 years, right? The village had a gap from 2004 to 2020. So comparisons are not always apples to apples, is
Sure.
what I want to say.
Understood.
Okay. Now that I've given all my disclaimers.
Okay. The fine print.
Hold
But
on.
we are indeed competing with all those communities for developments and things like that, so it's relevant, obviously.
To some degree, yes, there is certainly some regional competition that can happen. But in general, I think sometimes what you find is certain developers want to, are just more familiar with one community than another. They just tend to maybe do business there. It's not necessarily that they're looking at the fee from one community or another. It's just sometimes things are about relationships, and they have deeper relationships with property owners in one community, and so they tend to maybe focus there. They also might be more familiar with that community's land use planning and zoning, and they kind of have been through the process before, and
Sure.
some familiarity breeds
But if you
efficiency.
get a national firm, they're going to be looking at, you're talking about regional developers or local developers, but a national firm would probably look at things like that.
This is current rate. We're the left, the blue, at a little under 4,800. Madison peaks out at the highest. You have Cottage Grove, DeForest, Fitchburg, Madison, Middleton, Monona, Stoughton, Sun Prairie, Verona, Wanakee, with a range here. I would note, like, for a community like Middleton, for example, they're going through their study right now as well. What they found is, like, their price per acre of land. Do you recall what it was called? Because it's six figures, well above 90,000, like double, triple. And they're wrestling with this same thing, like, okay, well, that is the value of land, but is that the value we want to collect via the fee? And their staff have indicated they're pulling back to kind of think about this a little bit more before they recommend something, right? So at this point in time, yes, Middleton's at 2,900 and we're at a little under 4,800. Their fee is also much lower, and should be, by their own preliminary studies, would be way above McFarland's.
And now in this study, we're recommending going down for single family to 4245, right?
Yes, so, yeah.
Not a big jump, but it puts
Just
us
under Fitchburg.
a little bit.
Yeah, it puts us pretty close
Closer.
to Fitchburg and Monona on this scale. Yeah, that's what the data. That's what it is today.
I just have a couple comments. I'm happy that, you know, that the study kind of shows that we can bring it down, but I also, I just find the whole thing challenging for the average person to even understand. I mean, you could read it and read it and read it and not really understand it. So it's very challenging. Not your fault, just is what it is. I mean, so I don't know how to make that make sense more. And I also am, you know, I don't know, I don't want to put you on the spot, but I don't know that your questions were answered or your thoughts were is there alternatives that we could look at, as Chris was indicating, before we push this study forward, that would give us opportunities to look at that number and potentially even reduce that impact fee? Because I do believe that even local to Dane County, let's say, developers, they look at that. They know where they can, you know, a developer is going to say, where can I build the biggest house, the least amount of money and make the most profit? That's their job.
Yeah, sure.
And that is what they want to do. I mean, they're not going to say, well, I could build the same house in McFarland but lose $10,000. Let's pick McFarland. They're not going to. And that's what, I mean, for someone that does this on a full-time basis as a developer or builder, they're going to look at those numbers. And I just think we should take a step back for a minute, look again, look at some of Chris's questions, and let the board weigh in, and before we even accept this. And maybe we can do that at the public hearing. But I just think there's some opportunities to.
Yeah, so I
Yeah,
want
my
to.
perusal of the whole process, I was trying to figure out what's the element in here, what's the formula in here that could reduce these impact fees if we made some adjustments. That's where a lot of my questions were directed. And I'm not sure that I have an answer to that, but, you know.
So to help answer that question,
Yeah.
so if you look at this table, because it includes all of the data points that go into the equation. So we start with our level of service. How many acres of active and excessively passive special purpose parkland do we have? Okay, we have about 180 acres of that. Based on a resident population, that gives us 18.5 acres per 1,000. And then that is also our stated goal in our comprehensive outdoor recreation
But
plan.
should that be our stated goal?
What
if we
well, that's a
would do-
policy decision,
Right.
right? I mean,
Yeah,
that's,
what's the justification? Well, we discussed that. I mean, I asked the question and you said that there are national standards and then, you know,
yep.
again, comparing other communities and that kind of thing. But is that, I'm trying to get to the key of why our fees seem to be so much higher, but higher than everybody else in the area. Is there a particular thing about these formulas that are used to come up with these figures that we can do an adjustment to make ourselves more competitive with developers? I guess that's the bottom line.
I mean, I think it comes down to having to decide, you know, as we grow, do we want essentially less level of services, right? Like less parkland per person and less improvements per person, right? Like those are, I think, other than the amount we're paying or how we're deciding that number on the cost per acre, I think those are really the two big things that affect what goes into the cost here.
Well, I can remember a statistic from several meetings back where it was something like you could walk to every park in McFarland. It was like a half mile for every resident. Is that an accurate statistic
was
that
the
I heard,
walking
or did I just
statistic?
make that up in my mind?
The map, there are walking distance maps in the comprehensive
Yeah.
outdoor rec plan I don't remember if it's
I
a
don't
half a
remember
mile,
what it-
but it's very walkable.
But
So the-
that seems a little extreme, you know?
Yeah, well,
I mean,
the,
if you want some exercise, you ought to at least be able to walk a mile to a park or something like that.
we did several we call them walk shed analysis, but I think the one that we used was a 10-minute walk, which is a quarter mile.
That's what it was, a 10-minute
quarter
walk,
mile.
yeah.
So it's even more.
It's even less,
extreme
right,
than what-
right.
Yeah. And yet there are a few little areas here or there of the village that fall outside of that. But again, that's another one of those sort of newer ways at looking at the quality of your park. It's not just the quantity, right? But what if all of your parkland was just in one part of your community and it wasn't spread around, right? It's not very equitable either, right? So part of
The old school was a great big park at the center of the town, you
Yeah.
know, and everybody went to
When-
there.
When the town
and-
was smaller,
yeah.
that made sense, right? And
Yeah.
then as you grow, okay, now we have too many neighborhoods too far from that one park, right?
But you drive around McFarland and you see little bitty parks with a little bit of equipment, and I've
Yeah.
never seen hardly anybody using them, but, they're there for people to use. Anyway.
What would it look like if you, on this chart right here, what if it looked like if you changed that 18.5 to, I don't know, 16.5? I have no idea. I just threw that number out. What would it look like, and how would that change the results of this study?
You're going to have to give me 30 seconds.
You
to
can have
maybe
more than that. You don't have to
60
answer now.
seconds.
I'm just saying. I'm just wondering, when you make adjustments like that, what would it not only financially change the impact fee, but how would that change the community itself? Like, how would that impact me as a resident, you as a resident, you as a resident? How would that impact us?
And if I had small children still, I probably would, have a different opinion about that kind of thing, walk the kids down to a little park down the street or something like that. But I'm way behind that.
So
I do have grandchildren, but
I picked 15
Okay.
per acre. Okay.
Okay.
If everything else, all the other data points stay the same,
Okay.
cost per acre, household size, right? So for a single family, instead of 4,245, it would be 3,443. So you're looking at about $800 per single family home. The multifamily would go down about 600. The group quarters about 300.
And then can you go back? So that you said the single family, let's just for comparison, you said was 30 what? 30,000?
That'd be about 3,400.
Can we go back to the chart with all the communities?
Yep, sorry, that takes a little bit of
Sorry.
finagling. That's okay. We'll get there. So that's in like Cottage Grove territory, DeForest territory, in terms of height on this bar.
And both of those communities have significant growth happening in them.
But do they have parks?
Yeah, without knowing what their
I don't
acreage
know.
per thousand residents. It's kind of tough to
I don't know
compare.
the answer, yeah.
I guess I'm wondering. I mean, if we're not overstating the discrepancy in these dollars. I mean, if I'm understanding correctly, I mean, this is only if you want to pay the fee in lieu of providing the acreage for the park.
Right.
For one, so if you're buying the land at a comparable price to any of these other communities adjacent, that additional acreage for that park would have the same value. Now, taking that parkland out and putting up another dwelling and what you could sell it for there compared to here obviously would come into play. But if I'm understanding this correctly, a new subdivision with 50 single-family homes, well, that's fairly sizable subdivision compared to what's gone on lately. At 4,200, call it $1,000, a single family unit difference to some of these other communities. That's 50 grand. I mean, that's not even a rounding error in the budget of the subdivision. So if I'm following you correctly, in my mind, I think we might be overstating
Well, you got
being a deterrent to a developer.
Profit margin, 50 grand might be significant to a certain developer. I don't know, but
For a 50 home development,
I don't think so.
I
I also-
disagree, but
I also think there's two different ways to look at this. One is we obviously want to make sure that we're being competitive with developers. The flip side of that is we want to make sure that we're attracting the right developers and that the land that they're developing, that they're willing to make improvements to make it something that we all like looking at and being around. And I think part of the charm of McFarland is that we aren't a replica of a bunch of subdivisions over and over again. And I just think that should be taken into consideration. And when we're thinking through this, what comes to mind for me is I think this actually plays into a long-term plan for the village itself in how we want to grow. And would it maybe not make more sense to align this decision with the steering committee on the 2027 plan? Or is there more time pressure on this where the decision has to be made now?
You're referring
maybe
to
a lot of questions in
to
there.
the upcoming comprehensive plan
Yeah.
process?
Yeah.
I think this is separate from that project in the sense that this is really coming out of our comprehensive outdoor recreation plan, right, as the guiding document that says, yep, it's time to take a refresh of that 2020 study. And it's through the policies of the corp and going through that planning process where we had discussions about 18.5 acres per thousand, or we had discussions about 10-minute walks, things of that nature, right? And certainly the corp gets sort of referenced in the bigger comprehensive plan. But it wasn't, I guess, on staff's radar that we would be taking a look at the impact fee study within the framework of the comprehensive plan. We haven't identified that within our RFP that we currently have out for posting for consultants that, yep, we were going to do that. We had already obviously hired a consultant to help us with this. And
Sure.
If that helps.
Yeah, it does provide some
Yeah.
some clarity for sure. I think that how we strategically approach the development of McFarland holistically over the next decade, I think that this plays very dramatically into it, right?
Certainly through the comprehensive plan, we identify areas where we want future residential development and growth to occur. Sometimes that might include identifying potential areas to place a future public park. In other cases, it's more or less assumed that, well, through development of this property, at that time, there will be a parkland dedication of some size. We will have that conversation once we have a plat in front of us, once we have a developer in front of us, right?
Sure, yeah.
And there are cases where we know ahead of time, like due to some maybe proximity to some natural resource or something else we've identified, we'd like some parkland right here,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah,
And if that's the case, the policies require the developer to dedicate that land when we've identified it in advance.
Okay, I appreciate that.
Yeah.
So can we go back to the next step screen again?
Yeah.
So we're just looking at it tonight, just looking at it and just giving you feedback on it. The next step, you're going to go to the Parks and Rec Committee, right? I'm
Correct.
doing it from memory. It's not on my screen yet. So,
Yes.
and then you're going to do a public hearing.
At some point, we do need to do a public hearing. When we hold that is our discretion,
Okay.
right?
And then at some point it gets referred to the board. Is that by the plan commission then again?
Yeah, at some point, the planning commission gives a recommendation to
Okay.
the board.
But the public hearing comes first, so we have an opportunity to
Yes.
hear and react, and then by the time it comes back to the plan commission, we can add additional feedback or changes before we refer to the board.
Oh, yeah,
Okay.
absolutely.
How do we get developers to participate in that public hearing? I mean, the ones that we know locally, the ones that have been involved in projects here,
I've
show
been
up.
talking with someone from the Madison Area Builders Association. I know they'd like to be,
Yeah.
make public comment or be involved in some way.
Are we having difficulty attracting developers? Is that a problem that I'm unaware of? Just for my own edification, is that?
I think we could answer that like five
Right.
different people, 5 different ways.
Sure,
probably.
yeah.
I was just going to say that.
I think it feels like that for many reasons, maybe we just don't have the land they're looking for. We don't have, all the other things. There's a lot of infrastructure that's not prepared, not done yet, that might impact their ability for growth.
Okay.
We just haven't. I don't think we've ever truly marketed to big
Sure.
developers to come in here with, other than Viridian, right? I mean, Viridian's had some pretty big subdivisions here, but
Are they national or just regional?
I think they're regional.
They're regional, but they're
Midwest.
the biggest in the
They're the
region.
biggest right around here, yeah.
Yeah.
But I don't. I think that developers do talk, and I do think developers know that our impact fees are high. You
Yeah,
know, so-
and I know that we had a couple come in and make comment on that
Mhm.
within the past, 6 months or so.
Yeah, I think last time it was on the agenda. Yep.
Yeah, there's, like Stephanie said, there's any number of factors, part of it is locational factors, right? We have natural limitations and political limitations to growth in various directions. If you take, some communities somewhere else in the state that maybe can grow 360 degrees around it, right?
Yeah.
Sure.
They're in a different position maybe.
Mhm.
Also just, whoever owns the property, that's sort of the next 40, if you will,
Yeah.
right, or whatever, like, it's really up to them too. Like, are they at a point where they are entertaining offers to sell to developers? And they just may not be, and that's their personal choice, right? So
Yeah.
there's a lot of other factors outside of our control at the village beyond our impact fees that can influence whether or not we see, whether we're in a boom era of development or not, right? So
Thank you.
that's a tough one, like
Yeah.
yeah.
Two other considerations that I have. One was when we talked about the parkland impact fee, the data, the average price per acre we came out was $87,719. And then I think on the next slide, you said you rounded it up to 90. I think I would recommend, let's not go above what we've calculated. Like that 87,719 feels like an easy thing to at least bring it down that $2,300 and stay with what we calculated. And then second is just, I think when we bring this back and when we talk about it again, I'd like to, if the commission agrees, I'd like to have the context of the rest of the impact fees. Not that they affect one another directly, but just to have a holistic conversation, right? When we're talking about, we've got these 2 park impact fees, we have a library impact fee, we have a public safety center impact fee, right? I think there's one more I'm forgetting, but just to be able to look at it that way as well.
Anybody else have any comments tonight? Anything else, Andrew, that you wanted to add, or do you have what you need?
I'll summarize what I think I heard tonight so that we're on the same page. We'll next go to the Parks Committee, likely in June, Luke, but we'll finalize that with you as chair. Essentially, they'd be given the information that you have tonight. It's ready to go. Here we go. Then we can get any input they have on the methodology, including the 18.5 acres. I don't know if I'm hearing tonight that there's appetite to want to reconsider that or not. And if you want to get their input on that particular metric.
Yeah, because that came from the parks. Yeah.
Yeah, we had a conversation about the effect on the impact fees at the time, and essentially decided that would be a later conversation because at the root of it, we did want to continue the level of service.
Yeah. Let me bring this back up. Hold on a second for me, please. Right, so that's that metric in the equation. I heard potential preference here to not round that up. Okay. The amount of people per household, I don't know if we'll have 2025 ACS data by the time we get to the end of this. If we do, it's a quick swap in, and we'd see how that might change things. Another potential option to use is on the single-family home, is to use the overall village people per household, not the owner-occupied, which was, if I remember correctly from a few slides ago, 2.3 something. 2.36. That's just every household in the village. I don't know if would be appropriate. I can ask the consultant if we use the overall village average instead of 2.55.
How was the 5-year estimate calculated?
That is a rolling average that the Census Bureau collects. If you've ever gotten one of the surveys outside of the 10-year census, if you've been one of those lucky households, you fill that out, and that's how they get that. There is a level of margin of error.
Right.
That would only impact, if we took that approach, the single family, because if you just blanketly used that, it would end up having the effect of increasing multifamily and group quarters. One of the things that we did in 2020 was to go away from having one impact fee no matter what type of dwelling unit, and tiered it out based on single-family, multifamily, group quarters, recognizing that on average, there's going to be more people per household for a single-family home than a multifamily, and our best way of breaking that out is looking at people per household based on if it's owner-occupied or renter-occupied, and we do admit that we have to make the assumption that your single-family homes are owner-occupied and your multifamily are renter, but the opposite is true in both situations. But that was a way of lowering our impact fee last time. Yeah, so that's one way we could potentially take a different look here. And rounding that down, or again, you can always charge less as a policy decision than what the study suggests, but you can't do more. So you could say it's perfectly reasonable based on our data that the cost per acre of land is $88,000. I'll round a little tighter, Luke. But then say, if we're making a policy decision for competitive reasons based on a look at our other comparable communities or all of our other impact fees, that at this particular point in time, we're going to charge 80% of that. Pick a percentage, right? And that's a decision you could make.
Yeah.
It's perfectly legal. You just can't make up for it by charging one development the full rate and then somebody else 80%. You got to treat that uniformly.
So that's a critical piece of information. That's the ceiling.
It's the ceiling.
Yeah.
Correct. And that's the component, I guess, where we, from a staff perspective, definitely, if you're leaning from a policy perspective differently than just from a pure numbers perspective, because we're over here crunching data.
Yeah.
This is what the max is, but you could go less than that. So we will go to parks. We will come back in June. I don't think we'll be ready for public hearing in June because I think you would benefit from hearing what the conversation was before you hold the public hearing. Does that sound reasonable?
Sure, yeah.
Yeah. So the earliest then we might consider that would be July, but we're not committed to that date by any means.
Andrew, I think, sorry, one more thing. The one slide up from where you are, the other potential change that could be made is, we're using 4 properties to calculate that 87,000, right?
Mm-hmm.
And you walked through kind of the logic there, but that would be another place, right? Is how are we deciding which ones we're going to include in our average?
Correct. Again, these were the averages or median in the case of the suburban. So, yes, for what that's worth, yes, that is controlling. But I do feel like it wouldn't necessarily be appropriate to use what is the county average sale price for agricultural land in the county? Because you're going to pull stuff that's very rural, right? So that's a very low number and not something that you would be likely then matching what you would expect to pay for land in McFarland, near McFarland.
Yep.
I don't know, 6.4 million. Just saying.
Yeah, so I think we have what we need. If there's anything else, Chris, I also noted your suggestion about the rolling average on CPI. That's
Sure.
something I will bring to the consultant too and say, 2 years, 3 years. I think there's some logic in trying to
Smooth out the bumps.
smooth out the
Smooth out the
bumps,
bumps,
yes.
yes, exactly.
Yeah.
All right. Anybody else have any questions? All right, our next meeting is Tuesday, June 16th at 7 o'clock. I will make a motion to adjourn.
I'll second.
Or adjourn. Thank you.